Should I do my $750,000 hair? My $750,000.
All right. Today we have Tom Peyer, the editor-in-chief of Ahoy Comics, returning to the show. And today we're going to be talking about Edgar Allan's *SNIFTER of Blood*, which is releasing later in October. So let me just go ahead and bring in Tom, and we'll get to talking about the one of my favorite series.
Oh, thanks,
Hey,
Chad.
Tom, how's it going?
Well, thanks. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. How
Yeah. Yeah, it's right. It's going great. But yeah.
So I know last time when you were on with Stuart, I asked you about if when you got in, how you got into comics, and that was a couple months ago. And could you just kind of go over that again as a refresher?
I mean, how I got into the industry, or how I got interested in comics?
Both, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, I got interested in comics because I was a child, and back then, that's who comic books were for. I was a child so long ago. They actually made comics for children, and like mainstream superhero comics for children. And I just loved them. I loved Superman, and I was there pretty close to the beginning of Marvel Comics. So I got to read all like the Ditko Spider-Mans as a kid and stuff, and the Kirby Fantastic Fours, and it was just beautiful growing up that way. And I never stopped loving comics, except, you stop. A lot of us stop for a year when we're 14 because we're too old. Then if we're lucky, when we're 15, we're not too old anymore. And that's how it happened with me. So I missed. It's like a year of Fantastic Four I missed, but I just kept loving it. And when I was in my 20s, I did comic strips for a local alternative newspaper. And I did that for a long time. And that led to a couple of breaks and meeting a couple of people who were very helpful to me. Roger Stern, the writer, was one of them. And I got to write a little bit with him. And then I ended up being hired by Karen Berger as her assistant editor a couple years before the launch of Vertigo. So and that was really it. I haven't had to work a crap job since then. I'm lucky. I feel too lucky.
And you're one of the, I guess, founders of Ahoy Comics. Am I correct?
Yes. Yep. I'm one of the founders of Ahoy Comics, and we published, like, our first comic was on sale in comic stores 2 years ago this month. It was the first issue of The Wrong Earth. And so we've been publishing pretty steadily since then, except for a couple pandemic-related glitches like everybody else had.
Right.
So it's been quite. Art Steely, our publisher, Frank Camuso, our chief creative officer, and I, we're all here in Syracuse, New York. So it started with the three of us. And then we were somehow smart enough to bring some people in who actually knew what they were doing, like Stuart Moore and David Hyde, our publicist, and others. Sven Larson, who's now at Marvel, was a huge help early on. And Darren Bennett, who does our just does so much for us. I can't. If you look at the credits in our comics, he does like 3 important things every month. So anyway, so we're in pretty good shape after 2 years, I think. Except the world's falling apart, so we don't know what's going to happen to the world, let alone the comics industry or anyone in it. So I have to be honest about that. But so far, we're launching, after a bit of a hiatus, we're launching our biggest wave of titles yet. We're going to have like 5 coming out at once at some point in the next several months. And we're just, we're hoping for the best. we know people still want comic books.
And one of those, as I mentioned, is my favorite. Well, I guess it's the second volume. The first one was the Edgar Allan Snifter of Terror. This one that's for release is the Snifter of Blood.
Yes. Actually, it's the third volume. The first two volumes were both Snifters of Terror, and the monthly comic, we called it Snifter of Terror Season 2, which we belatedly thought might be a mistake because who starts anything with Season 2? It doesn't get across really the anthology, and you can start reading it anywhere and read it in any direction because it's all self-contained stories. But look at this. I have something to hold up. The trade paperback collection of Snifter of Terror Volume 2 is going to be out in shops immediately, very soon. If I were a professional, I would have the date in front of me, but it's like any second now, believe me. This has this Richard Williams cover that is a homage to Action Comics #1, starring Edgar Allan Poe.
Actually, I think it came out last week.
Came out last week. You know more about my company than I do. And so...
it's because your PR people are great and sent me a email.
They really are. And anyway, so the third series, Snifter of Blood, is going to press this week. So I guess it'll be out in shops in about 3 weeks. And it's got a lovely, terrific, badass Joe Thompson cover. That's it's like a reference to, it's like Edgar Allan Poe is like a 1950s motorcycle tough guy. And his girlfriend's sort of on the back of the bike, and they look happy. And it's in black and white, which I love. A cover in black and white you hardly ever see.
Yeah.
And it's got a really terrific, funny, hilarious story by Paul Cornell, who's famous for writing a lot of Doctor Who stuff. A lot of great Doctor Who stuff, like 3 or 4 of the best episodes of the TV show. And he's such a good writer and such a funny guy. And this is with Russ Braun, who draws The Boys and other fine things. We've got a Dean Motter story in there. And it's a really good, solid issue. So we hope you all like it.
So, kind of taking a step back, what was it? How did the whole Edgar Allan Snifter of Terror? Where did that idea come from? Because Poe is one of my favorite writers, so that was one of the things that kind of hooked me or made me want to check out the series right away. What is it about Poe's stories that do you think lends it to this type of the way you guys tell those stories?
Well, can I ask you something first? As somebody who loves Poe, what did you think of it? Were you I mean, it's such an irreverent book about Poe. Did you like that?
Oh yeah. I kind of like the twisted take on Poe.
Yeah. Our Poe is. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I think that's the one thing I like about Poe is his stories are so scary, and then to have just to those classic stories that he's written, which and haven't done so well, was just perfect.
Cool. My favorite thing about it is just the way we sort of humiliate Poe the character. It's just everybody knows Poe had a drinking problem, so extrapolating from that, he's reduced to introducing stories in a horror comic book, and he's not happy about it at all. But that's really all he has left. But the reason we were lucky in a way because we didn't think it through to like its best points, but its best points were there anyway. Like it's really helpful and rare to have a public domain author famous literary character whose face everyone recognizes, which is strange on top of that because there's only like 3 pictures of him in his whole life, and you only see 2 of them ever. And but for a comic book host to be like that visually recognizable and pre-sold in that way was a real gift to us. We thought about, we're starting out, you know, we want to do great comics and work with terrific people and all that, you know, creators and all that stuff. And that's all a given. But you have some practical real world problems, which is how do you get noticed in this world where there's a million new comic books every week? And, you know, so we had thought about licensing a famous property. And then the more we thought about it, the more we thought, you know, they're going to take all this money and they're going to tell us what to do, and we won't, they'll be overruling us, and they'll be, we'll be taking all the risk. They'll just get the checks every month. And it's like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to find a dead guy that we don't have to pay. And a dead guy who can't tell us to do it differently. And so Poe was just a natural because he's so, I mean, comic book short stories are such an established and classic genre, and he is the master of the short horror story. So it didn't take a lot of brains. Just basically a willingness to humiliate him is all really it took.
Yeah. So how do you have people pitch stories for the anthology? Because I know that Mark Russell, that's where he does his serial monster stories. And do you actively search out pitches, or do people pitch them to you?
It's gone both ways, where we've invited people, or people have shown us things that they're working on. It's definitely gone both ways. We're pretty full up on Snifter of Blood. We'll probably be looking for things again after the first of the year, but probably not before. But we were really lucky to get Mark, and then that led to the series that Mark is writing for us, Second Coming at Billionaire Island. So he's such a wonderful writer, and people know who he is, which is great for us. And
yeah, I was talking to him the other day, and he said that he had a couple more of the serial monster stories to at least to get you guys to a trade paperback or something like that, collected edition.
We would love that. We definitely are all in on that. All in on that. The monster serials, as he calls them, is it's a series of stories, starting like horror stories, starring characters that are similar to the ones we know from the boxes on breakfast cereals. So you have a breakfast cereal vampire and a breakfast cereal Frankenstein, and you know who they are. I can't say their names, and you know why I can't say their names. But they're such good stories, and they're like, they have that jokiness to them, but you can forget about it too, because I said to Mark one time, this is like a Hammer film, reading this. And he said, what's a Hammer film? He hadn't seen any, but he somehow captured the flavor of them exactly. So, which I thought was weird. That gave me like a chill inside. But they're terrific.
Yeah.
Oh, and Peter Snaberg. I have to mention the artist, Peter Snaberg.
Okay.
Has done amazing work on that series, and I hope he draws all of them. So
yeah, those some of the first ones I always go to, when they come out. in the
yeah, there's one in Snifter number 2, Snifter of Blood number 2.
Okay, good. Now, I really love the the cover art that you guys have done for the series. The first, I guess, volume is, I guess, movie posters. The second one looks like classic. I would say not classic comic book cover. There is the theme that you guys going for a theme with those, or just something
Yeah,
that they were inspired to do?
you picked up on exactly what we were doing, and we did have the themes. And for the first two runs, we had Richard Williams painting the covers, and Richard painted Mad Magazine covers for like a long time, and he's wonderful and great. But it seemed like the approach we should take, using Edgar Allan Poe as our Alfred E. Newman, just to put him in these familiar situations, these familiar parodic situations. We don't have Richard on this next run, but the theme, if I can ruin it, is we're going pulpier. We have a sort of like motorcycle leather tough guy for number 1 by Joel Thompson. And next month, Ryan Kelly shows us Poe taking a spacewalk, and it just gets dumber from there, I'm happy to say.
Now, what do you have a favorite Poe story that maybe you haven't? I don't know. Maybe you've done it in the book, or have yet to do it. But do you have a favorite Poe story that sticks out for you?
My favorite Poe story we haven't done. It's Mask of the Red Death. And I've thought about having someone do it or doing it myself, but it's really kind of, the thing I love about that story is it's so visual. It just seems to me like an exercise in descriptive writing. And so if you add pictures to it, you're almost defeating it. But of course, what we do is we find our way to make it stupid. And I would do with that, but it hasn't readily like jumped out at us as a story that can be easily made stupid. It's really a great story. We have got to, now that I've said that, we've got to do it, and we've got to humiliate it somehow. But
I think my favorite, I would say my favorite Poe story is probably, well, the first one I remember reading is The Telltale Heart. And then probably one of my favorite ones is probably the one that you guys did in Snifter of Terror 5, which, well, the fall of House of Usher, which you guys made into the fall of the White House of President Usher, which was fun.
There's Peter Milligan and Richard Case. Yeah, I love that one. I'm glad you like that. We've got a Telltale Heart coming up. That's got a real nice punchline. And
I can just imagine.
I have to backtrack and say that Ryan Kelly cover I just bragged about is by John Proctor, and Ryan's doing the next one.
Okay.
So
now, do you see, do you see this Edgar Allan Poe thing? Is it like a ongoing, or do you have like the certain, say, certain amount of series that you do, seasons you want to do, and then kind of, put it on the shelf and move on to something else?
it would be nice I would like to do it for as long as it's funny, but that's up to the marketplace. If we can only sell so many series, then we can only sell so many series. But I think we could make it funny for several, because there's just so much of that material there, and so many ways to take away his dignity.
So, I believe your other book from Ahoy Comics is also coming out. Is it this week or next week? Penultimate Man?
Penultimate, yeah.
Yeah.
Penultimate is smushed together. He's called Penultimate because he's the next to the last stage of human evolution. There's like one generation better than Penultimate. And he grew up in their future. He was a throwback. And they, the ultimate people, were a little embarrassed to have him around. And because he was primitive. To us, he's like insanely like advanced, but to them he was primitive. So they kicked him back to our century, where he came to our century and he succeeded in being this widely beloved, graceful, wonderful, handsome superhero. But he can never forget that his people didn't want him, and he really hates himself. He's hiding this horrible self-hatred. So there was a short story, that was a short origin story we put in an anthology we did last year called Steel Cage. And,
Yeah, I remember we talked about that last time.
yeah. Now the penultimate story from Steel Cage is available on Comixology for free now, so you can read it before this if you haven't before. It's called Penultimate number 0. And you can access it without and just leave your money home. So as we get into the upcoming series, Penultimate has built himself an android sidekick named Antipenultimate, who understands that Penultimate is hurting deeply inside and wants only to fix him. So that's the question of the series. Can an android fix a person? Can a sidekick fix a hero? Can anyone fix anyone?
Yeah.
And Alan Robinson from another series we did, Planet of the Nerds, does really, really terrific art on this.
And will we be seeing any more of The Wrong Earth or High Heaven?
Well, Jamal Igle is working on The Wrong Earth now.
Okay.
Another series of The Wrong Earth that's going to launch in January. And Jamal and I are working on it with Juan Castro, the inker, and great colorist Andy Troy, Rob Steen, the letterer. And it's if you read the first series, you know that these two superheroes who are two versions of one superhero, mass crime fighters. One of them is grim and gritty, and the other one's old-fashioned and campy. You know, one lives by the campy one lives by the comics code, and the gritty one is really kind of, it's like they just canceled the comics code, and he wants to get away with everything he can. So in the first series, they swapped Earths. They were trapped in each other's Earths and had to function in these societies they weren't made for. But in this, the upcoming series is set on a third Earth where they meet and either team up or have a war. But they're going to be, by the end of the first issue, they will come face to face, which we're all very excited about.
So, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, maybe about the Snifter of Blood or the Poe that I may have mentioned? I think we covered a lot, in
Yeah, I think we did. I'd like to tell people too. There's another series of Second Coming coming out. Mark Russell and Richard Pace and Leonard Kirk's series about the superhero who becomes roommates with Jesus Christ. And the first series was just so beautiful and well written. And the second series starts in December. Maybe we'll get it in December. And we're psyched about that. And Happy Hour starts next month. That's a Peter Milligan with Michael Montanat. It's about a near future America where it's a crime to be sad and the law is enforced with great brutality. And we're trying to get that out before it really becomes real.
I was going to say, this is not a real life comic book, is it?
No. I think we covered all of our. This is our big wave after the pandemic, after the quarantine. I mean, we're still quarantined, but we just wanted to like come back worse if we could. So these are the 5 titles we're coming back with.
So, what has being the editor-in-chief for Ahoy, even though you've had a long career in the comics industry, has being the editor-in-chief for Ahoy taught you anything new that, or kind of reinforced anything that you've learned in the past?
It's probably been the most freedom I've had editing. I still love editing because I didn't do it for a long time. Like I did it for a few years when I was at DC and Vertigo. Then I didn't do it forever until we started Ahoy. So I really love doing it. And this is probably the freest hand I've had. And I just try, I go back and I read like the comics of my life, from my childhood and before and growing up and my adult, just all the phases of life. And I just try to use what I love as a guide, and what I hate as all the disappointing comics as equally, a guide of things not to do. And it's kind of a seat of the pants thing, but I think in a way I'm trying to please myself, but I think there are things that could please everybody. Like you should put out generous comics. You shouldn't charge $4 for something somebody's going to read in 5 minutes. So,
and I think backup material that you guys provide with Ahoy Comics is that extra little oomph that gives people their money's worth.
Thanks. That's what that's for. And it's like we want people to spend time with the comics. We want them to be able to, and if they can find something interesting in the back. And we've been able to run what I think is some really first-rate fiction in the back, and even some poems and puzzles and stuff like that. So I'm very proud of the back of the book.
So if you want to kind of give a final pitch about the Snifter of Blood, then and where people can maybe find you on social media.
Sure. Sure. Well, Snifter, we've got different creators every issue. They're great. We've had the best bunch of experienced and dedicated and talented and skilled people come in. It's like the gang in Fast and Furious. It's like everybody's got a specialty, and we're just proud of all of them. So like I said, next month we have Mark Russell and Peter Snaberg again. We have things coming up by Rachel Pollack is coming back. It's always great to have her. And we have some new writers you might not have heard of too much, which I'm very pleased about. But it's 6 issues, and there are 2 stories in every issue, plus a lot of back matter, text stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope you just can grab them and sit down with them for a while and really be entertained.
Well, I'm sure that they're always again, as you say, they always take me more than the average 5 minutes to read, and and that way I feel like I'm getting my money's worth.
And if you like Snifter of Blood, we've got 2 volumes of Snifter of Terror out that have some great things in them. We hope you can check those out too. Yeah. And as far as social media, I'm on Twitter a lot, too much. It's at Tom Peyer, TOMPEYER. And the Ahoy Comics Twitter account is at Ahoy Comic Mags, as in like comic magazines, because we're magazines, because we run prose fiction. So check out both of those if you can.
All right. Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time this evening to with us, coming back to the show. I
Sure.
apparently didn't scare you too bad last time.
No, this has been enjoyable, and it's nice to talk to somebody who actually reads the stuff and enjoys it.
Oh,
I appreciate it.
and I'll keep my eyes open. And if if you have anything else you are working on and you want to talk about, then I'd love to do that.
Cool.
But until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully one day we'll meet in person.
I hope so. Thanks a lot, Chad.
All right, have a good evening.
You too.